Welcome back to another episode of Heavy Wireless. And today I'm talking with Todd Thorpe. How are you doing today, Todd?
Keith, I am fantastic. Thank you for asking.
So I brought Todd on the episode today to talk about MDU design decisions. My career in Wi-Fi started, and some of the very first projects I ever worked on were MDUs. MDUs meaning multiple dwelling units, apartments, buildings, condos that are really close together, etc. And Todd has, 25 years experience in this space?
Yep. We're really pushing the envelope. Yes.
Yeah, we're old guys. It's okay. We can talk war stories. So I thought I'd have you on the podcast to talk about maybe the past, present, and future of Wi-Fi in MDUs. So let's start there. How did you start in the MDU space?
Well, so background goes back about 35 years in telecommunications. And then I really got into the MDU space 20 plus years ago, working for large cable operator, doing door-to-door, literally selling door-to-door cable in multifamily properties. And that was before, internet really was a thing. So we're selling cable TV. And then, of course, internet becomes a thing. So now we're selling video and internet, just going door to door. And then I migrated from that into starting to develop a multifamily sales program I worked for Charter Communications and started developing that program for them. And then it just kind of evolved from there and really just honed in on providing technology solutions for multifamily properties. Could be existing, new construction, was your traditional type multifamily, senior properties, affordable, student housing. So kind of all over the gamut.
So you've seen lots of changes then over those 20, 25 years.
Yes.
One of the things I first started with in MDU, this is before Wi-Fi even was a thing, is I started a company and for apartments, MDUs, there's a process by which an owner, an investor, looks at a property and says, I want to buy this property because it's going to give me this long-term income stream in the future. How much am I willing to pay for the property? Well, how much income can I get off the property? And one of the amenities that people had done is they might put washers and dryers in the units, and then they could raise the rent, which means there's more income, which means the investor says, oh, I can get more income off my property. And as long as the cost of the washer and dryers were less than the monthly lease or whatever on the washer and dryer, then it was a good investment. Yep. I got together with some friends and we installed PBXs into apartments.
Sure.
Because
I think branch exchange, yes.
Yeah. So at the time, I mean, some of us are old enough to remember if you worked in an office, you picked up the phone, you dialed 9, you got a dial tone, and then you called out. Well, we had figured out how to reprogram a PBX that when it went off hook, it automatically dialed the 9. So the apartment unit person who lived there would pick up the phone, it would dial the 9, but they wouldn't hear it because it's still in their hand. They would lift to the ear, they would hear a dial tone, they'll dial their number, it would go out, and it worked perfectly. The benefit was, instead of 200 landlines coming into 200 units, we might only get 12, 15 trunk lines in. Sure. And as long as everyone didn't call at the same time, odds are, and there's mathematical formulas around how many trunk lines you need for how many people. And then we sold that kind of like we're selling Wi-Fi or internet to tenants today. So I've been in this space for a long time. How did you initially start designing Wi-Fi for MDU? What was the requirements?
Well, I think initially you have to look at it from two perspectives. You have existing properties and you have new construction. Very, very different yet similar characteristics. And by that, I mean, new construction, you have a blank slate. You can install the network and you don't have to worry about existing walls. So in an existing property, you have existing walls and you have to figure out how are you going to get from point A to point B and make it both aesthetically pleasing and safe for the resident. You don't want wires hanging around and somebody, it's a choking hazard, it's a trip hazard, it's a fire hazard, etc. So coming from this space, it's not that unusual to see properties wired very, very poorly. And I'm not saying the company I worked for did that, but you see that in a lot of older buildings, wires hanging on the outside of the building and wires going literally like through a window to try to literally get whatever that is, whether it's TV or internet, from point A to point B. And most of your older buildings are coax. They're not Ethernet or fiber. So now you have that type of situation. How do you deliver a Wi-Fi product over coax and making sure the resident has a really good experience versus delivering probably more of a premium experience using either Ethernet, active Ethernet with electronics, and we can talk about that, or fiber, delivering fiber. So over the years, you saw that change in migration, and it probably started when managed Wi-Fi became a thing, and that was probably around 2015. So we're coming up on 10 years ago, when really it was in student housing. If we're talking just multifamily, it was student housing that started to really deploy that technology. Outside of multifamily or student housing, it was what? It was hotels, right? It was resorts and hotels. Holiday Inn and Marriott, et cetera, thought, okay, I need to provide my resident with something, with some experience. And now you have this internet. It's kind of new. And hotels, hospitality started to really deploy that. So I think that the change has been the physical characteristics of delivering a very good Wi-Fi experience. What I say is akin to a resort or a hotel. You're seeing that in multifamily mimic what hospitality, what hotels have been doing for years.
But one of the things I saw that was different when it first came out was, and this isn't new construction, because new construction is way, way easier if we can get the cables in. By the way, I was just working on a project in the last couple of weeks where it is multi-unit, but it's assisted living. And
sure.
they chose to not bring Ethernet to the TVs. Now, these are assisted living people. They're on their TVs all day long.
Right,
and they thought, well, we have TVs and the TVs support Wi-Fi. If we install Wi-Fi, then we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, and didn't think through, what if we have it had 400 units, 400 TVs all showing HD video over our Wi-Fi network, and didn't even think what that load would do to the airtime. And they could have fixed it at construction by just bringing the Ethernet cable to the TV.
Right. And have an Ethernet port there or a wireless access point, yes, that you could plug in. It's that foresight.
Yeah. So we've come a long way. Some of my first designs for Wi-Fi were horrendous because of the requirements that the owner, the investor of the property wanted. They didn't want to pull any new cables, or as few as possible. So they said, and this is my term, I don't know if this is an industry term, but I call it outside-in Wi-Fi. I don't have access to inside the family unit, but they need Wi-Fi. So how about if on one wall I put an AP and I just blast it through the exterior wall into another one? So I do have access to hallways. So let's put APs in hallways, and then we'll just push it in. Sometimes interior hallways, but a lot of time it was from one building to the next building. I can see the building across the way, so I should just push the Wi-Fi through the wall, through the window. It's radio. AM radio goes through fine. Why won't this work?
Yeah, it'll go. Yeah, right. Yep.
Yeah. So the outside-in technique has, for me, failed pretty
consistent. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there's sometimes, if If someone's dining room table is by a really big window and the window is the only thing that the RF's going through and there's no walls, yeah, there's places in the house where you could get Wi-Fi. But I've also done outside in third world countries where all the walls are brick and concrete. And they just somehow think this is magically going to go through the exterior wall. We've moved then to more inside out, gratefully, with the advent of more cable, hopefully copper, Ethernet, new construction, we're getting fiber. And we get a lot better consistency inside of a unit if the AP is actually in the same unit.
Yep.
How do you go about, I mean, you have 20 years experience in this, cutting down on the co-channel interference that happens when you get individual APs that are so close together?
A lot of APs, because you're going to have a single SSID, the correct way to set up true managed Wi-Fi, because if you're going to use access points...
I guess where I'm backing you up a bit. Phase one, every unit bought their own AP.
Exactly. And so you have what's called bulk internet or bulk modem, where a lot of residents brought their own device, or the cable operator, phone operator, they sold it to the owner for a bulk rate. But they're still, and it still happens today, very, very common, is having a kind of a consumer grade modem router in every unit, but you will have RF interference. You will. You take a property over 100 units, bulk internet with using a consumer grade type, Netgear router modem combination in every unit is great for smaller properties. But once you get over 100, 75, 100, 125 units, if you want to deliver a really good experience for the resident, because ultimately that's what it is. The owner needs to make money off of this. I mean, that it is, and get their investment back. But at the end of the day, if you're going to cut corners and do that, what was it, outside in, putting, APs down the hallway, the resident will end up suffering. So it's really putting in an access point in every unit, ceiling mount or wall mount. And in some cases, maybe two, but you're going to have a single SSID for the property. So the resident will connect to whatever AP they're closest to. So you leave your apartment, you're in apartment 101 and I'm in apartment 203 and you want to come and visit me. As you walk the property, you're just going to connect to the nearest access point. And you're going to have a VLAN, a virtual local area network. You're going to have your private network that will literally follow you wherever you go, as if you're still connected back to your unit. You go to the fitness room or the clubhouse or the pool, you would connect to that access point. So that's how you eliminate that RF interference. You use a single SSID and then just connect to those access points and roam.
You called the first one bulk, and that's where an internet provider delivers internet to the facility, then facility sells access to it, and individual clients, individual apartment units would have their own gear. The next step up, and what's the category you call this, where there is a managed service and it's all installed and it has a single SSID? Does it carry a name in the MDU space for that?
Yeah, but managed Wi-Fi, but it's also bulk. So the owner, so you have three levels of service. You have the owner just lets the resident do whatever they want. They may have, multiple providers providing service. Resident contacts whoever, phone company, cable operator, whoever gets their internet service. It gets installed. Resident pays that provider directly. Owner is completely out of it. Then you have bulk, what's called bulk internet or bulk modem. It's synonymous, and that's having that residential consumer grade equipment. It's coax fed. It uses the existing coax infrastructure normally. and every resident has one of those devices in their unit, sits on a table, sits on a desk, whatever, but the owner is buying that service at wholesale bulk rate. All of the units are on, and then the owner would resell that back to the resident. They pay $20, $30 from the operator. They charge the resident $50. And then managed Wi-Fi is also bulk. All the units are active. So the billing arrangement is exactly the same. What's different significantly is the design and the infrastructure of how it's deployed, resulting in a far superior resident experience.
For on those tiers you just mentioned, on the first one, if I have a Netgear in my house, I control it, I give it an SSID, I have the password. Yep. If I'm going with a managed service and a single SSID, as a resident, how do I get my own network?
Good question. So there's technology. It's called pre-shared key. PSK is what it stands for. Pre-shared
our audience
key.
Definitely knows what PSK is, but obviously right. This is not normal PSK because that would be the entire complex shares one.
Correct. So the resident gets a unique key to log into their own network. So it's going to be, Parsons Apartments, is the network name, but I'll have my own unique login. You'll have your own unique login, but we'll both log into the same network using our own unique credentials, our own key, if you will, to log in. And then that allows us to roam anywhere on the property as if we're still back in our
and so
unit.
If I'm in a gym and I need to print something out of my unit, I can print from anywhere because it's my network. Now, a lot of vendors carry this, MPSK, DPSK, PPSK. So it's not unique to any one vendor. It's
Correct.
A industry-wide solution. And then when a resident moves out, how does the staff deal with turning on and off those unique PSKs?
Yeah, so generally, like with Cambium, we have a platform called CN Maestro that the leasing staff would use to issue new credentials or suspend credentials or anything like that. Resident moves out, they have the ability to go into a single pane of glass dashboard and manage those credentials for the resident. Resident also could go into that same platform, and if they wanted to change their password or update their password, they have the capability of doing that. So the provider will have some sort of dashboard, single pane of glass, a management platform that they will use because they're also connected into the network, monitoring the network 24/7, looking at any APs that are offline, a lot of times just remotely fixing them. They don't even have to roll a truck and go on site. They can remotely fix those access points and even switches. But yes, everything is managed through a platform that the staff would have access to. And then they can, in turn, kind of play traffic cop, in a sense, give out new passwords and in a very simple form.
Let's circle back and talk about the differences in design. Yep. One of the things I've been harping at for literally 25 years is, and this happened to me like decades ago. I was at a site, and by turning off APs, the throughput increased because they had too much co-channel interference. And right. The thing we have least in Wi-Fi is airtime. And what happens in the first example you gave, where every unit has its own Netgear type of consumer grade device, is they don't play nice together at all, and so they chew up all that airtime. What are the processes to go through for a managed Wi-Fi provider to make sure, even though we have 200 units, we minimize that co-channel interference?
Yeah. So what what they're going to do, and again, it will vary a little bit by provider and equipment that's used, the manufacturer, but for the most part, it's all going to be pretty much the same. So first of all, a provider will bring in, they're going to have a contracted speed that they are going to deliver to every unit, and they're going to have to abide by their SLA, service level agreement with the owner. And it could be, say, I'm going to do a gig to every unit. And that's always wired speed. It's not wireless speed, because as you know, and your listeners know, wireless is, even though we're talking Wi-Fi, it's still a wired connection because you're bringing in that wire, and then the device is connecting wirelessly. So let's say you're going to do a gig to every unit, and that's what you're contracted to do. That has to be there if a resident were to connect to an access point, if it had an Ethernet port, or the building is wired such where there are wired ports in the unit, maybe in the bedroom, and they could literally connect their device to that. So the provider is going to bring in a backhaul circuit that will more than deliver that 1 gig to every unit. Could be 100 units, could be 300 units. But then the provider will manage that traffic, that bandwidth, just like a 10-lane highway, and everybody's zipping around and ready to collide with each other. They're going to put all of those cars in their own lane and make sure they stay in their own lane. And they're going to manage that spectrum and that bandwidth by monitoring the traffic that's on each one of those access points. It's not like speed capping like you would see, but it's really making sure that each one of those access points has the capacity and the speed to deliver what it is that the provider has to do. And you can only do that with managed Wi-Fi. You can't do that with a modem in a router in every unit because you're not managing that spectrum. So the provider is going to do that via whatever management system they have, and they're going to have eyes on that network from their network operations center or wherever that is, where they can physically see switches and access points and see what that traffic looks like. They can see how many devices are connected to an access point. They should, really good providers can see all the way down to the device level and know, are they connected at 2.4? Are they connected at 5 gig? Are they connected at 6 gigahertz? And as we know, most devices aren't connecting at 6 gigahertz yet. I mean, they're all 2.4, 5.
Speak about your house. I have a 6 gig house here.
There you go, right? So,
well, Todd, you have decades of experience in the MDU space. If anyone was interested in learning more about this, how could they track you down and ask some more questions?
Well, I would say look me up on LinkedIn, Keith. That's probably the easiest way to find me. Connect with me if we're not already connected on LinkedIn. My email address is on my profile, but I'll just give it to everyone quickly. It's todd.thorpe@cambiumnetworks.com.
Well, thanks for your time today, Todd. We've enjoyed talking about MDU and having a little bit of nostalgia here because it was the start of my career and has taught me a lot about how to do density before we got into large public venues. Well, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Keith.
You've been listening to another episode of Heavy Wireless. Thank you.